to make a game like Grow a Garden on Roblox. And you know, it wasn't by accident. I joined this game during an event, as having diverse events like those are likely a main driver behind Grow a Garden's retention. But how can you even make an event system like this inside Roblox Studio? Well, as it turns out, this is way easier than you might think. So now I'm inside my Roblox Studio environment I created over the course of the past episodes. But you can also do this inside a blank Roblox experience. If you would like to have a visual element like an altar, you can just open the toolbox up here and search for any 3D asset, for instance lunar altar, and go with the one you like the most, for instance this one by optic fiber. And as it turns out, this is the very same one I used in my Grow a Garden like premium framework. You can also find in the description, but it also has this BillboardGui text over it, so we're gonna add that in a minute. For now, let's press 4 and rotate it a bit, and we always need to make sure all of its parts are anchored. You know, unless it's an object you want to carry around, then you will have to use welds. So for now, let's set this to test here and give it a try. So from what I can tell, it isn't falling apart or anything, meaning there are no parts left we need to anchor. If that would have been the case, we would have had to, for instance, select all parts or mesh parts or whatever, and make sure this attribute is set to true, like so. Now how do we add this BillboardGui to it? Of course, an alternative would also be to add a green GUI label, for instance to the bottom right, like in Grow a Garden. You can also have both, obviously. So if we were to go with a billboard variant, you can just add a BillboardGui to the hierarchy like so. And if you would like the user to be able to interact with it, like by pressing buttons on it, you would have to add it to starter.GUI or player.GUI at runtime, which again at runtime you can find below your player. But in this case it is only meant for, you know, visual purposes, so we can add it to workspace right away, which will facilitate, you know, this synchronization process between the server and the client quite a bit. If you like, you can also rename it, and now it needs to know which quote-unquote real world object it needs to be kind of attached to by clicking here next to Adorni, and then selecting whatever element of our, in my case, Dreamy facility. What do we have here? Yeah, that should work. So now you can see this kind of blue rectangle, meaning it is displayed correctly, although it is still empty, obviously. If you like, you can enable always on top, which will also display the thing even, you know, behind other objects, like that. I think in my case I want to disable it. You can give it an offset down here, where this is an absolute offset, if you like, a relative one to the Adorni, as well as a relative one to its own size. So let's set this to 5 and see what happens. Perhaps 10. There you go. Sometimes, depending on your offset, if you find this a little bit too jiggly, you can also put an invisible part up here and attach it to the invisible part instead. But now let's add a text label to it. If you don't want the light to interact with it, you can also disable it by setting this to 0. And you can even give it a max distance, for instance 100. So whenever you surpass this max distance, you can see it getting hidden, like automatically. I guess 50. And now if you like, you can also make it background transparent like this. For instance, choose white as text color. And we're gonna change this text attribute in a minute inside our code. But if you like, because it makes it easier to test things, you can also change it right away. For instance, to next event in 10 seconds. It doesn't really matter what you put in here. If you like, you can make the text bold and slightly bigger. If you would like to make it even bigger than this, you can also increase the size on the X. So the relative X size is this value here, like the letter ones are the absolute ones, I should say, like so. Do the same thing with the text. If you like, you can also set the relative X to 1, so 100%. And we can even add a slight text stroke, like I did in my premium framework. And in order to do that, we can set this to 0.5, for instance. But now how do we add the actual logic to it? Time to add first server script for this video. Don't mind those existing ones. If you like, you can check out the previous episodes, but they shouldn't matter today. Set a new script, give it a name if you like. And now, as always, there's a bunch of ways to do this. For instance, let's say we want to wait 10 seconds before starting the event. You can do it like this. So every 10 seconds we start anew. But if you'd like to do it like this as well, you need to make sure not to add any code below this, since this will run infinitely. However, you can encapsulate it like so. If you would like to run it in parallel, then you can add code below here and it will work nonetheless. Now let's say we want to wait 10 seconds, start the event. For now, let's just use this debug message, then have it take place for 10 seconds. Of course, you can also go with 5 minutes here, so 5 times 60. and then we'll be ending it again. Let's have a look. Event started, and there you go. But I think I want to change this to a size depending, or to a position depending on the camera. So let's try to go with an extend offset right here instead, and reset this one. You can also test this at runtime. And if we were to take this up here, oh, what do we have here? So there is a part that wasn't anchored after all. Let's change that. So there we got our culprit. But now let's say we also want to change this BillboardGui or the screen GUI you might have respectively. Again, lots of ways to do this. I will be showing you what I consider the easiest one now. We kind of need to, instead of waiting 10 seconds at once, we kind of need to distribute it. So let's set this to true now, and wait for those 10 seconds independently, like so. And now, for instance, we can print the remaining time like this. So at first it is, I being the iterator, or the counter. So at first it is 10 minus 1, so 9, 10 minus 2, 8, and so on, seconds left. If you would like to go with a random event, which you can do as well, you can do it like this. So it is either 1 or 2, you can also have it range from 1 to 10 or whatever. And then you can kind of branch like this, but this is just meant to be an example now. You can even save what event you had last time, like persistently, in case the server is restarting. You can also put this, let's say, twice in a row. So first you got, a lunar event, then a flat event, then a fall event, or whatever we got. But let's keep it simple for now, and have a look where we're at. Awesome, look at that. So instead of printing this in the console, where your players won't be able to see it anyway, we want to change this text, so let's get access to it inside our code, which we can do like this. Make sure this hierarchical structure and the names line up with the actual hierarchy you have in place. And the reason I use wait for child here instead of accessing it directly is in order to make up for possible server delays. If you messed up any of those names or the structure, you will see a yellow message popping up in the console at runtime. And now we can set it, so instead of printing it, we can do it like so. Change the text attribute, the very same we were just changing manually down here, and setting it to next event in, then concatenated the remaining seconds we had a second ago, concatenating it with seconds again. And same here, if you would like to display it using kind of this format, there's also a code snippet, this one in particular, from my Grow Garden-like template, you can also use instead. Just pause the video and copy it real quick. This is just a comment. But make sure to remove this first part, like so. Let's have a look. There you go. Well, you saw that. Let's see why this happens. Oh, never mind. I was just removing this by accident. And the way it looked, I might also have to increase the width of this element even further. And since I set the x to 1, I can just scale this thing here. And now we can essentially whatever we like during the event. For instance, we can replace the sky with a different one. I used this one here in my template, I guess. Yeah, I think so. Preferably we put it into replicated storage. Like this is my current one. I put it in here as well. This one, put it inside here too, and give it a name that makes it easier for me to find it later down the line. Now the way I insert it is by moving it into the lighting service. So I can either move this one directly or copy it, put it in here and then delete it at the end of the event. I can create a dedicated function for that. Perhaps do this vice versa, so it lines up better, and call it here a respective name, like this. And do the same thing here. Get access to the lighting service. If there's an existing sky, which we can check by trying to get access to an object called sky inside lighting, we remove it. Get access to replicated storage, because this is where, in our case, we store the sky, like the templates. Clone it, we get access to it via its name, we pass in here. So event sky and normal sky, those need to match those. Reparent it to lighting, so it can show up, and setting its name so we can delete it next time we change the sky. Let's give it another look. So lunar event. Alright, so I just need to swap the two. Right at the start we were supposed to have a normal one. But now in case you want to add mutations and so on, how are we gonna tell our other systems, for instance the plot system managing the plants, how are they gonna tell the event is active or not? And how is the client gonna tell in case you want to add music to it or display a text notification and so on? And this is where int values, like integer values, can come into play. For instance, you could add one to replicated storage. Let's do this while in edit mode. For instance, we can rename it to event active, like in case you want to have multiple events, and 0 for instance could mean no event active, 1 could be the lunar one, 2 could be flood, and so on. If you want it to be just binary, like in my case, you can also add a bool value, and for instance keep it disabled, like with value set to false at the start. Name it, I don't know, event active for instance. Now very easy we get access to it like this. Make sure the names align as per usual. And now we can set its value to false, meaning no event active, like so, and do it vice versa down here. But make sure to set .value so that it's actually this attribute instead of the object reference itself. And now we can easily inspect this at runtime and see in case it changes. There you go. So it appears to change correctly. Let's see what happens once the event ends. There it's disabled again. And by the way, we can already tell it is working on the client too, like when it comes to replication, because this is essentially the client we're currently looking at, and with this one being the server. And the reason it is replicated is because it is inside replicated storage and also changed from the server. And you can tell the way I did it in my template is by having one of those example lunar coins, like this example currency, increment whenever harvesting a plant during an event. Of course, you can also, I don't know, increase the size, change its color, and so on, which we're gonna have a look at next time. Again, if you need help doing any of this, feel free to reach out. And until then, as always, happy coding.